Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Larry Lursey. Welcome back to the channel. Today it's going to be another one of our Luminar Neo transformation videos where I'm going to take an image, run it through the paces, kind of show you what my workflow would be, making some repairs and things first, and then going in to Neo and playing around and seeing what kind of an unusual look we can get to kind of make it look a little cooler than it was when we started. So it should be a lot of fun. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you get notifications on upcoming videos. It's a lot of fun. I'm excited to get going on this, so without any further ado, let's roll the intro. Okay, so here's the image we're going to be working with today. It's one I took in Italy last year, and I just liked the arrangement. It wasn't a great direction of light, kind of an overcast day, and so it just kind of has a washed out feeling to it, just kind of a grab shot, which I liked some elements to it, but just really lacked a lot of punch. So I think this would be a great candidate for us to play around with and see what we can do to kind of give it a little more impact. Let's turn this background, just double click on that and turn it into a layer. First thing I want to do is, before I bring it into Luminar, is fix a few things on here. Contrast is clearly an issue, but I don't want to fix that until I get into Luminar because I want to kind of rely on some of those tools for fixing the contrast, so I'm going to hold off on that. The other big problem I have is the composition. I don't like all this dead space here in the middle. You know, there's a lot of nice texture in here with all these little weeds and stuff coming up, but there's just kind of a lot of dead space, which I'm not crazy about, and I'd like to reduce some of this. So here is what I'm going to try to do here. Is kind of an unorthodox way of doing this, but I feel like it works easiest for me. I'm going to grab this rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to pick somewhere along here where there's not too much happening along this transition line, and come down to just above the tree, about there. So I'm going to basically just compress this section right here. So I'm going to do Command T or Control T, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift and basically compress this as much as I realistically can. That's probably enough. I mean, you go to here and it starts looking compressed, but to here I think it'll be a little harder to detect. So I'm going to go to there, hit return. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select this upper region, and I'm going to do Command C to copy, Command V to paste. So now, as you can see over here, I've got this little strip on its own layer. You can't tell because it's right on top of the other one. And I'm just going to lower it down until it matches up right there. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, you can see as I turn it off and on so we can see where that line is. There's really not a distinguishable spot where you can see it. A little bit right through there possibly. And we can try moving this thing up. Oh, there we go, I went too far. Let's just use the little arrow keys until we know we're right there. All right, now there's no line. It's disappeared. Perfect. We do have this extra part at the top, but we're going to crop that out anyway. So I've got these two layers here. I'm just going to go ahead and do layer merge down to make this all into one big piece. Now what I'm going to do is crop it. So I'm going to basically crop off that double sky there at the top, and I don't want all of this. What I'm going to try to do is do more of a slimline print, or a little more panoramic versus the more 8:10 proportions, and try and move this tree over a little more into the thirds. So let me grab up here, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to take maybe about to here, let's say. Let's try about like that. Do image crop. Command D. Okay, so here's our new setup. I'd still like to have some more space over here, and I feel like there's still too much over here. I like what's happening here, but I might get rid of this little piece. So first let me add some space on this end. So I'm going to go up to Image Canvas Size, and let's just add 3 inches. We're going to anchor it this way so that it's stretching that way, and it should add 3 inches to this side of the canvas. Yay, it worked. All right, then what I'm going to do, just grab these trees. I'm just going to stretch out the part with the trees. Maybe come to about there. Command T. Again, I'm going to hold Shift so that it's not doing all the sides, just this side. Stretch that out to the edge. Return. And there we go. Okay, so now we've done a little bit better. We've still got a little extra over here, which I am just going to crop off. Let's just come over this way and just crop off there at the top, that little section of trees back there. I also like that because now I'm isolating only these greens here and not having another piece of green floating up in the corner. So here we go. We'll do image crop. Alright, so here's my new piece. I like that much better compositionally. I like that you're kind of got the green trees here as the subjects and everything else kind of goes this kind of pale pastel, which actually kind of works. I like how it looks like this tree just kind of stepped away from the group. So I think it's got kind of a nice little story of this one tree that stepped away from the crowd. So I like that. I like where we've got everything positioned. So now what we need to go back and do is bring out a little richness, decide what we want to do color-wise and that type thing. So I want to do this on its own layer, so I'm going to copy this. And we'll just go ahead and rename this Neo. And we'll go up and jump into Luminar Neo. Okay, so here we are in the software, and we could obviously go through. It's going to recommend some of these presets like the easy landscape, but we don't want to do that. We want to go through and do this thing manually and kind of figure out what direction we want to go. So I'm just going to come over here to edit, and we'll kind of work our way down through here. I'm not as worried about noise in this thing or sharpness. I think we're pretty good in both of those, so I'm skipping those. So let's jump into develop first. We can bump the contrast a little bit. I want to save a little bit of this low contrast because I think it'll help us to bring the trees out. So I'm just going to bump that up a tiny bit, maybe even come in to the curves a little bit, see if we want to tweak that just a little, just darken it a tiny bit. You can always come back here and do the before and after. I think that's just kind of fixing a little of that film that's over the image, so let's keep that for now. Develop to get out of there. Now let's go to Enhance AI. And a few things on here. The accent, of course, is going to do all kinds of things, bring in some color. We can push it all the way over to see what it does. It's going to bring back a ton of texture, a ton of color, which I think is a little too much for this, but I like a little bit of it. So we'll come to maybe about 25 there. We can try the sky enhancer, but I don't know that I want to enhance the sky. I think I kind of like having it just go away to nothing. So I'm going to put a little bit, maybe about 15. And again, let's look at there we were. Just giving it a little more snap, which I think works well. Okay, so we're done enhancing. Now structure is going to give us a little bit of sharpening through here, which I don't know that we need for sure, but I wouldn't mind this tree being just a tiny bit sharper than everything else. So I'm going to bump this up just a little bit. I'm going to put that at 10, put the boost at like, let's put both of them right around 10. All right, see if that's doing anything. Yep, a little bit of clarity there. Then I'm going to mask, use the brush. Let me get my pen here, and I'm just going to go through and kind of put a little mask just on this tree so that it's just applying this sharpening to the tree. There we go. So now we can see the before and after. And it's only affecting that tree. You can kind of see it in there as I do it off and back on. Pretty subtle, but I think it's helping to bring a little bit into it. All right, now what I want to do is I'd like to play around with the color a little bit. I'd like to give this tree a little more saturation than this tree. Again, just to help it stand out a tiny bit. So I'm going to come in here to color and I'm going to bring up that saturation a little bit. And it's easy to go too far with this. I'm going to do about 25 and then maybe 5 on the vibrance. And let's see what that's doing. There's before. after. I think it can handle a little more, so let's go to maybe 35 and 10. All right, that's definitely giving it a little bit more. And again, we're going to go into the mask with a brush, and I'm only going to paint on this tree so that it gets that little extra burst of color, but the rest of the scene doesn't. We can even do a little through here. And we don't have to be perfect. I don't care if the edges exactly have it. Doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of like that. And there we go. It's getting a little bit more. I almost think we can go back and do a tiny bit more, so I'm going to bump that up to 40 and 16. There you go. It's got a little more color to it, which I think works nicely. All right, so let's jump into landscape, which is always a fun one. We've got the dehaze we can try, and again, you can push these all the way over and see what they do, and that's terrible. So I don't think we want to deal much with the dehaze. Even though it is almost kind of a foggy scene, it's got that, it's like kind of a misty morning. I don't like what that is doing. I think almost we're better off playing up the misty part of it. So I'm going to kind of leave that for now, but let's play with the golden hour and see what this does. And again, you can push it all the way over, and it's going to make that those fields behind the tree go super golden, which is kind of nice. I like how it makes the green really jump off the yellow. But I don't want to go too far with it, so I kind of like that. I like that before it, you get these little yellow highlights. This kind of gives everything this kind of warm glow. So I think that that helps us a little bit. So I'm going to drop down to about 40. And we can play with the foliage as well. I like what the foliage is doing, but I want to keep these two effects separate. I want to just get this part set how we like it. So I like that. So I'm going to click out of landscape. Then I'm going to go back into landscape. And now I can do this foliage enhancer and only be dealing with that one effect, if that makes sense. So I'm going to enhance this tree a little bit more. And again, come in with a mask. Get the brush. Let's just give that tree a little more jump. That is definitely making it stand out a little bit more. Let's paint a little bit more on here, just so that we're getting this edge in this little piece. Make a little of this. All right, let's see the before and the after. Great. We can even come back, now that we know what it's going to look like, we can come back here and even add a little bit more to it. I don't want it to be obviously different from the other tree, but here at about 32%, it definitely has a little more. Let's drop it maybe a tiny bit, maybe 29. So it doesn't look that different from the other trees because you have some of these deeper highlights throughout here. It's just a little more concentrated, so I think it draws attention to it a little bit. Kind of a personal taste. You may love it, you may hate it. Okay. Now we can come back here into dramatic if we want to play around with that, which is going to kind of add some contrast and things that take away saturation. And again, in this situation, I usually love the dramatic, but I think in this case it doesn't work as well for us. Let's take a look at mood and look at some of these lookup tables. Sometimes we can come through here and try some of these. Let's just randomly start at the bottom, see what that does. And I kind of like what that's doing. It's a little over the top. Let's try and I'm trying to use some of these cinematic ones. See, that San Diego completely changes the color. That's not what we want. I do kind of like this riverside though. From that to that works nicely. I think if we keep that and bring that effect down a little bit, same with the saturation a little bit, there's our before and after. Kind of gives it a nice little glow. So I like what that's doing. I'm going to bring it back just a touch. I'm going to bring that down to about 10. Let's see what that does. All right, that's pretty good. Okay, so we've got all that done, and we can come down here at this point and look to the before and the after. We've got a huge difference from that to that. I think that looks really nice. You know, you've got your mystical here where you can kind of throw in a little bit of this kind of a dreamy quality, which I think might work here as well, and that's kind of the over-the-top version, which I think is too much. But I don't know that a little of this might not be nice just to kind of soften things a bit. And so from that to that, I think gives it a little more of a dreamy type feel, and I think that goes with the nice soft storytelling. So I'm kind of happy. I've got it about 24 there. So there's the before, there's the after. Now again, we're starting to get into some things that are more judgment calls, because you've got this shows a lot more detail, and here we're starting to lose some of that, but I kind of like it. So I'm going to leave it in there for now. Now, you know, as I'm looking at this, I'm noticing these tire tracks going up through here, and I don't know if I want to mess with that or not. We can go in and play around with it. We could come up here to erase and click on erase and see what happens. Dial that in. That's pretty good. Let's take care of it so we can go ahead and get rid of that. I think it was a little distracting, but I think we're good now. All right, so now let's go back to our before and after. Love it. So now what I'm going to finally come in and do is mess here with the super contrast, which again, a lot of times I would start with the contrast, but in this case, since they're going for a little more of a mood, I feel like maybe doing it at the end works. And the way I like to do this sometimes is just add a little bit to all of them. So I'm going to go 10 or 11 to all of these, and then start playing with the balance. So starting with the highlights, and I think I like it more on this side. Midtone, if I move it to the right, it's kind of deepening that background. I think I kind of like leaving the background a little more pastel. And then coming into the shadows, it's kind of emphasizing the trees, so I like moving it that way a little bit. So this is very small, but you can see from that to that. Kind of lightening it all, but giving us a little bit of kind of a shadow boost, if you can see that. So it's a pretty subtle change, but I think we've done a lot of nice things. So I'm pretty happy with where we are right now. You could go in possibly and enhance the sky a little bit, but I think as I keep looking at it, I think I want it to just kind of disappear like it does. So pretty happy with this right now. Let's go ahead and apply this effect. We can of course go down here and save it as a preset, which isn't always a bad idea. We'll just call this Lonely Tree, mostly because if I come back in here and decide I want to try and recreate this look with a similar image, or maybe rework this one again, I'll kind of be able to get back to where I started with all this. So let's go ahead and apply this, jump back into Photoshop. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this. I'm going to leave Neo, but I'm going to put Lonely Tree so I remember what that preset is. So all right, here we go. So again, we're looking at the before and the after, and when we do this, I think a lot of times you come back out of that program and you're looking at it and you go, I think I've gone too far. So what I will typically do is one of two things. One thing you can always try is just switching the mode, sometimes going to like a overlay or soft light. Like, what does soft light do? It's kind of an interesting look like that, but I'm going to stick with leaving it normal mode, but I'm just going to take the opacity down just a little bit so it doesn't have quite that oversaturated glow, maybe about 84-85%, and I think that's pretty good. Let's bring up the other image and compare the two real quick. Okay, so here we go. Here was the original, and here is what we ended up with. Now I do see here I've somehow managed to bring back those tracks a little bit, those little car tire tracks, which would be easy enough. We could just clone those out, go back and do that later, but overall I think it's a much stronger image. I think it's got a better composition, much more flow to it, and just has a lot more impact, I think, than than where we started. So it's a different direction. You might like it. You might have preferred this. A lot of different directions we could have gone with this image. Maybe at another point we'll approach it again and try taking it a different direction and see what we could do with it. Would be an interesting experiment. But for now, we've got this one, which I'm pretty happy with, and I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into how I would think through and proceed on trying to work up an image similar to that one. So let me know what you think. And there you go. Pretty happy with the transformation. You know, there's so many directions you can go when you're doing this type of editing, and you know, whether it's a matter of just trying to enhance it a little bit or take it into a whole different place. I think it's just something that's a lot of fun to experiment with, and sometimes you stumble onto things that work out really well. So I encourage you to play around and give it a try. If you have any other questions about how I did any of this, or you'd like to see something else done in a little more detail, leave a comment below and let me know, and I'll try and add it to the list. That's all we got for now. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.